Ska vi se. So, good morning and welcome to this meeting organized by the Norwegian Helsinki Committee and Civita. And also a warm welcome to all watching this event on streaming. My name is Mathilde Fasting and I will be today's moderator. The topic of this event is: what would a lasting and just peace for Ukraine look like? Our guest today is Oleksandra Matviichuk. She is the head of the Nobel Peace Prize Laureate winning Center for Civil Liberties in Ukraine. She is among the world's most respected human rights defenders. Since the Nobel ceremony in Oslo in 2022, Ms. Matviichuk has spoken on several prestigious platforms worldwide with the message, "People are not numbers. We must ensure justice for all." Prior to the talk with Oleksandra, the Norwegian Helsinki Committee will present the work they do documenting war crimes in Ukraine since 2014, together with local partners. And before we start, I'll go through a few practical details. After the introduction and a moderated Q&A, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. They should be clearly phrased in English. We have a microphone. My colleague will give it to you when it's your turn. Please speak up and remember to present yourself, as we are live streaming this event. You can also share your thoughts or ask questions on Twitter X with hashtag #CivitaFrokost, but please make sure that your mobile phone are in silent mode. We will end this session no later than 10 a.m. and ask you all to stay until we finish, if possible. Now, a warm welcome, and I will leave the stage to the Norwegian Helsinki Committee for their presentation.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome on behalf of the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, and thank you to Civita for co-hosting this together with us. And warm welcome to Oleksandra. I will be very short because everybody are here to listen to you, not me. But I need to ask the question, do we want the war in Ukraine to end? The question may seem ludicrous. The war since the beginning of 2014 has resulted in thousands of deaths, mutilations, endless suffering, millions of refugees, devastation of infrastructure and cultural heritage. Should we not want that war to end? Well, yet there is this discourse here in Norway that seems to been here the last several weeks. Support Ukraine and you are against peace. We are warmongers. That is, of course, nonsensical. I will not dwell on this debate, but we have to discuss if we are to secure peace, a stable peace and stability for Europe and Ukraine. We must assert an international law. Proposals for ceasefires and negotiations have been put forward the last several months, but Putin has shown very little interest in peace. The military attacks against Ukraine are increasing, not diminishing. This weekend, the alarm in Kiev lasted for 12 hours. We will still hope that this process must continue and succeed, and we support increased pressure against Russia, because that is where the pressure must lie, not against Ukraine. One way to go is to increase the economic sanctions against Russia. But what should the conditions for a peace deal be? We are not all here to answer all of these questions, but one thing must be clear. The interest of the people must be secured. Their interest in protection at home and their interest in justice. And this is this morning's theme. And in line with this, NHC takes actively part in the People First campaign initiated by Oleksandra Matviichuk of Center for Civil Liberties and Oleg Orlov, from the fellow Nobel Peace Laureate from Russian Memorial. The key priority of this campaign is that any negotiated agreement must be the release of thousands of Ukrainian children deported to Russia, thousands of Ukrainian civilians held captive in Russia and occupied territories, thousands of Ukrainians and Russian prisoners of war, and the release of thousands of political prisoners in Russia, many of whom have protested against Putin and Putin's war. We are also asked the Norwegian government to prioritize this call. Lene Wetterland will present our documentation work. She is heading the NHC Documentation and Accountability Hub called DAH. We are, through this center, documenting war crimes and other core international crimes under Russian occupation in Ukraine, together with our local partners. Facts matter. They form the basis for future justice in Ukraine and elsewhere. This has history shown. This meeting is organized, as I said, together with Civita, for which we are deeply grateful, this great cooperation we had with you. And now, please, Lene.
Thank you, Berit. Thank you, Matilda. Thank you, everyone, for coming here today to listen to this very important discussion that will take place later today. First, I just wanted to talk briefly about the work that we do, introduced so well by Berit. First, why do we do it? Well, the short answer is that we have seen it before. We know what can happen if facts and analysis are not taken into account. We started documenting war crimes and crimes against humanity in Chechnya in 2010, and we saw already then that the impunity that the Russian forces were met with, they were not punished for what they did. There was impunity. It has led to the atrocities that we see today. We can see that the same officers are doing the same crimes in Ukraine. We know, as Berit mentioned, facts matter. Facts are very important. We need to document what has taken place, and we need to document while this is ongoing. The discussion last week on Bucha is a case in point. How can one question what happened in Bucha? It has been so well documented right after it happened. Our colleagues were there, Norwegian Broadcasting was there, international organizations were there, local Ukrainian organizations were there. They documented, they interviewed, they took photos. Everything is documented. Even in our document database, we have more than 100 materials on 78 victims, all civilians, subject to torture, to rape, to murder, and other inhuman treatment. Facts are important, and we need to gather them, and then we can counteract the propaganda, the disinformation, the denial that takes place when one can question what has actually happened. You can't question it. It's proven. It happened, and it has been proven over and over again. With the facts, we can also make sure that people are punished for what they did wrong. We can counter the impunity that allows these crimes to continue. As we have seen from Chechnya until today, they take place and they continue unless someone is punished for what they have done. New violations take place in new locations. Had there been reactions to what Putin and the Russian forces did in Chechnya, maybe we wouldn't have seen Georgia, what happened in Georgia. We wouldn't have seen what's happened in Ukraine today. There wouldn't be more the trauma that people go through. We're talking about the people here, the thousands of people subject to the trauma influenced on them by these atrocities, by these violations taking place against them. And not at least, when the documentation is taking place, it's more often the local organizations that are doing it. They know what happened. They know what is important for their countries. They know what matters. They need to be heard when discussions are ongoing on what to do further, who should be punished and how. We need to listen to the local organizations and what they have done. So how do we in the Norwegian Helsinki Committee document? Well, we have a skilled and motivated team here at the Norwegian Helsinki Committee. We have a teams of analysts that are coordinated by the team here in NHC. They are based in Ukraine and elsewhere. People who have escaped, who had to escape Ukraine because of the war, but still want to make an effort. They take part in the documentation work. We support Ukrainian civil society actors, and we cooperate with them. We have trained them and work very closely together with them. Also now. We didn't start documenting in 2022. We started in 2014, because that's when Crimea was occupied, and that's when the atrocities started. There's been a full-scale war for more than 3 years, but occupation has taken place more than 11. And there are people living in those territories that are now being debated in Istanbul and elsewhere. We are also looking at the war crimes and the treatment against civilians with a holistic approach. It's based on human rights, and the victim is in the focus. Not the political considerations, but the victim. Documenting what happened to the victim makes sure that you have all the important facts in place, and when you gather those facts, then you can find out what happened. You don't start with the thesis and then find the proofs. To prove it, you ask the people what happened, you document thoroughly, you analyze it, and then you have a very clear, independent picture of what happened. And all this documentation work that we do is situated around the IDDO investigative analytical database that we run. It has been developed by Ilya Utmelidze of the Case Metrics Network. We started using it first in North Caucasus, and now we use it in Ukraine and also in Belarus. It's a very thorough database. It's very comprehensive. It's not necessarily what everyone would need when they document war crimes or when they document human rights crimes. Many organizations do that. What's so special about this database is that it takes the bigger picture, the trends, the linkages between, like you can see in this map. On the bottom, you have the perpetrators that do the crimes on the spot, and on the top, you have the people behind it all, Putin and the others. The database registers and analyzes, and you can also build cases inside the database. It's prepared along ICC requirements. So it's a very thorough and very comprehensive tool to use for documenting war crimes. Only in 2024, together with local partners in Coalition 5am and Truth Hounds, there was more than 4,000 documents entered into the database, identifying more than 4,876 victims, more than 2,000 protected objects, and more than 1,407 incidents. And the database analyzes it all and helps us to prepare cases to use, because we want the material to be used. And where do we use it? We used it when Cecilie Hellestveit and others were working for the Moscow mechanism of the OSCE ODIHR, looking into the trends also of the Russian occupying forces. UN commissions and UN special rapporteurs can use the material. We use it for diplomatic purposes. Those taking part in discussions should know about the facts when they are doing their diplomacy. It's being used when Ukrainians are applying for reparations for crimes committed against them or property lost. We cooperate with the Ukraine Prosecutor's Office. We have been in contact with the ICC in Ukraine. Information about perpetrators can be used when we send cases to sanction mechanisms around the world in Europe, identifying the perpetrators and what can happen to them, their economy, their travel possibilities. Universal jurisdiction is another matter. If a perpetrator comes to Norway, the person can be tried and sentenced in Norway, as long as there's the facts and a case is prepared. And Norwegian police know that they can turn to us for this documentation if they need it. We used information for advocacy, for outreach, for research, but also very importantly, it's the memorialization part. When people share their stories, they know that the stories are heard. They're taken care of by someone who actually cares about their stories. They listen very, very attentively to what happens. They don't re-traumatize them by asking the several questions many times if they need to. It's coordinated with other actors. But knowing that you can share your story with someone that actually cares, that your testimony can be used for legal purposes, but not necessarily. It can also take part when history is being written afterwards, because who is writing the history, and what is that history writing based on? Again, facts and documentation is very important. We start now a modest contribution to this by the fact sheets that we will launch, a series of fact sheets. You will see the first two printed in the back next to the coffee, but there will be more of them, and they will be launched on LinkedIn and our website. So please pay attention to LinkedIn and to our website, and see for more fact sheets that will be released. We will be looking at particular incidents taking place in Ukraine. We will look at particular crimes and different methodologies. So we will be diving into material that we have in our database, working together with our partners and colleagues in Ukraine, looking more into the open source information available, and analyze it in our team. So there should be more details to come based on the material that we have. Later in August, there will be a more thorough report launched on what happened in one particular town called Balaklia, which was under occupation for 6 months. A range of atrocities took place there over the course of 6 months, and illustrate, sadly, what can take place when you look at occupation that has taken place over 11 years elsewhere in Ukraine. It will not be pleasant reading, but it's important. We should know, and the world should know. So this is an easy way to our LinkedIn, to other social media, and I invite you to follow what we are doing. Now, thank you very much for your attention, and we will look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Lene. We will continue this conversation with you, our guest of honor today, Oleksandra. A warm welcome to Oslo.
Thank you for the invitation. I love Oslo, and I came here with a huge desire to be there.
And what a day, because yesterday we heard about the most spectacular Ukrainian attack on Russian air bases, far, far away from Kiev, and even close to the Norwegian border up north by Murmansk. And also, of course, the other way around, harsh Russian attacks. So what are your comments to these attacks? And I heard you said something about the Russians not commenting them at all. Not yet.
3 things I want to mention: that Russia intensified attack against civil objects, civilians, generally cities in Ukraine for the last months and last weeks. And frankly speaking, it's very exhausting. Even if I personally made decision not to go every time to bomb shelter, because I want to return control over my life. I don't want to live in bomb shelter. I can't tell my body that my body has to follow this rational decision, and I can't sleep because the whole night you hear the explosions. It's exhausting, and it's very painful, because when you get up finally in the morning, you know about next death, next shelter, residential buildings, or schools, or museums, or hospitals. You see the next funerals, you see a lot of pain, and it's also exhaustion, because everyone knows that law is a lottery, and when we go to bed, we have no idea whether or not we will get up next morning, because Russia deliberately targets civilians. So with the methods how Russia waged the war, and it's a psychological pressure for Ukrainians to capitulate, because Russia can't win the war in the military field. That's why Russia started this war against civilians. And finally, after the next sleepless night, we got news that these planes, which bombarded us every night, are burned. For sure, we was glad. I wrote in my Twitter that today is a Children Protection Day, and this is the best way how to protect children. because these planes, these strategic bombarders, they sent rockets against Ukrainian children every night. And just a week ago, the rocket, no, it was a drone. The drone hit some private building in Kiev region, and they killed a mother. And the mother, she's rather young, and she tried to use your body as a shield to protect your 4-year-old son. So her son survived. He's still in hospital. And frankly speaking, I don't know whether or not this 4-year-old boy knew that his mother will never return to him, because she was intentionally killed by Russian drones during the night while they were sleeping. And so I think it's a very good investment to protection of children in Ukraine, this brilliant military operation. And what is very important to highlight, and what is I'm especially proud for, that Ukrainian forces target only military target. So when you look at these videos of ordinary Russians, which appeared now in network, they publicly comment, no civil objects was suffered, just planes were burned.
Yeah, I guess that's an important thing, because what you just explained to us is that the Russians go after humanitarian objects, civil objects. They go after schools, they go after buildings where people live and so forth. But you managed to do an attack specifically on exactly the military material, and in this case, planes. And during the night, I guess I haven't heard about casualties inside those planes, because they were obviously on the ground. But today and this coming week, we have I would always say peace talks, and I'll do it like this, because peace talks, what are they? What do you expect for this coming week after this weekend's attacks? Because obviously they might have something to do with each other.
Frankly speaking, I have no expectation. I want to be wrong. And I wish we will have some results. But I know, as every Ukrainians know very vividly, that Putin started this large-scale war not because he wanted to occupy just more part of Ukrainian land, after when he occupied Crimea and part of eastern region in 2014. Putin started this large-scale war not because he wanted to occupy Bakhmut or Avdiivka. Let's make a test. Please raise your hand if you know where Bakhmut and Avdiivka are in the map. And this is a very prepared audience, because you come to this event. So please raise a hand who know. As I mentioned, even in very prepared audience, there are half of people who can't find these places in the map, because it's not Rome, it's not Berlin, it's not Washington. It's very important for Ukrainian cities. It's our cities, Avdiivka and Bakhmut. But it's very naive to think that Putin started large-scale war and lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers just to occupy Avdiivka and Bakhmut. Don't be naive. Putin started this large-scale war because he wanted to occupy and destroy the whole Ukraine and move further. He sees Ukraine as a bridge to Europe. His logic is historical. He dreams about his legacy. He wants to forcibly restore Russian empire. And it was his own words that collapse of Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe in the last century. And the problem is that, unfortunately, of 3 years of large-scale war and 11 years of the wars of the such, even despite this hundreds of thousands of losses from Russian side, Putin still doesn't refuse from his goal, because human life is the cheapest resources for Russian states. And that's why I don't have a lot of expectations, because dictators see dialogue as a sign of weakness. They respect only strengths. So if we want to get result of these conversations, we must demonstrate strengths. We must to show Putin that it's impossible for him to achieve his goal, not just to postpone it in time, to imitate this peace process, to decrease the level of support to Ukraine, and then start a large-scale attack again.
What do you think that Western countries can do? And talking about that, I also want you to comment on, I know that it's very early in the morning still, but the Polish elections of presidential elections yesterday made the peace candidate win, and he is against supporting Ukraine, and he's also on the far right spectrum. So what do you think that had happened in Poland? You mentioned a bit about that before we started this talking, and you also have thoughts about what Russians do. So how can we counteract that and be strong in the Western European countries and in the EU?
I am a human rights lawyer, and my organization received a Nobel Peace Prize. So believe me, Ukrainians want peace much more than anyone else. Because war is horrible. War is horrible. Nobody wants war. But peace doesn't come when country which was invaded stop fighting. That's not peace. That's Russian occupation. And occupation is also horrible. Occupation is the same war, but just in another form. Because as you see from our reports, from reports of Norwegian Helsinki Committee, occupation is not just changing one state flag to another. Occupation means enforced disappearances, torture, rapes, denial of your identity, forcible adoption of your own children, filtration camps, and mass graves. This is what occupation is about. And for us, it's not the numbers, as I mentioned, because we work with the stories, we know people, it's a human beings beside these numbers, and that's why this provides this human dimension, which is losing when discussed in abstract form. So just to return this human dimension, I will tell you a story of one person who was found in the forest in Izum. We just recently, you see the slide with the numbers of more than 445 civilians who were found in these mass graves after Ukrainian army liberated Kharkiv region. And this is a story of children writer Volodymyr Vakulenko. He wrote beautiful stories for Ukrainian children, and entire generation of Ukrainian children brought up on his daddy's book. During Russian occupation, he disappeared. I know his family. His family hoped to the last that he's alive, but just like other thousands and thousands Ukrainian civilians are illegally detained and kept in Russian legal places for detentions. But when we found this mass grave in a forest near Izum, in the mass grave under the number 319, we found dead bodies of this children writer. And you can have a very natural question. Why? Why Russians killed this children writer? The answer is simple. Because they could. Because it's one task to occupy the country or some part of the country, but this is another task to save control over these territories. And in order to save control over the territories, they deliberately exterminate active people, priests, children writers, journalists, environmentalists, teachers, human rights defenders, any active people of community. They banned Ukrainian language and culture, they destroyed and robbed Ukrainian cultural heritage, and they even take our children to Russia. They put Ukrainian children in Russian re-education camps. They told, they're not Ukrainian, they're Russian children, your parents, your families refused from you, and you will be adopted by Russian families who will bring you up as Russians. So this is what's going on in occupied territories. So knowing this human dimension, now return to this wishful thinking. And what politicians, at least part of them, try to convince, that if we will stop support Ukraine, the war will stop.
But the kind of peace that you will get is not a peace.
But the war will not stop because occupation, even according to international humanitarian law, it's also the continuous war. Nothing will stop. What these politicians don't tell, they don't tell truth. They don't tell that the human suffering doesn't stop. That for a lot of people in occupied territories, the beginning of occupation, it will be a beginning of a new wave of human suffering. What they don't tell the audience, that taking into account the difference between Ukraine and Russia, because let's be honest, Russia is a huge, enormous power. Russia has veto in UN Security Council. Russia has nuclear weapon, oil and gas, which mean a lot of money, 140 million population. Russia has supporters like China, Iran, North Korea. So in such circumstances, when you don't help Ukraine, just be neutral. It means you help Russia to occupy Ukraine, just with your inactivity. And what they also don't tell the truth to their audience, that the war will not stop. When Putin occupied Crimea and eastern part of Ukraine, first, what is always been in shadow, Ukraine was a neutral country in 2014. We was neutral. We officially proclaimed our neutrality in our constitution. It's not help us. Because Putin is not afraid of NATO. Putin is afraid of the idea of freedom, which came closer to Russian border. So what happened next? We had so-called peace agreements with Russia. 2 peace agreements concluded in Minsk. Did it stop war? No. Russia violates ceasefire daily, without any circumstances. And how Russia used these 8 years of peace agreement? Russia prepared the economy for the next wave of sanctions. Russia built a powerful military base in Crimea. Russia trained their troops and start large-scale war. So don't be naive. Probably some politicians can afford itself this wishful thinking, but really we can't. Because if we not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further. He will attack next country. Because you can't understand the behavior of dictator through your set of values, through so-called rational approach. His approach is historical. He thinks how his name will be written in the world history. And that's why he don't care about Russian people, about human losses, about destruction of economy, about a lot of things which we suppose he has to care. He don't care, literally. He cares how to forcibly restore Russian empire. And this means that not just Ukraine will be a target.
Well, in order to prevent this and in order to prevent Putin's dream about being up there with his name for history, which is obviously part of his plan, how do you envision a just peace for Ukraine? And what does that look like to you? And could you also comment a bit about what others can do in order to help you? And also, if we have time, are there any Russians inside Russia that would be able to change Putin's plans, or even remove him as a dictator in Russia? I'm not sure if that's possible, but Russia is a lot of people living in Russia, and when attacks are coming, they obviously see that the war is also something that concerns them, even though soldiers are being poured in from a large part of Russia, but not the central parts of Russia.
There are a lot of things which I want to cover, but if I forget something, please remind me later. First, about Russian people and their attitude to the war. Let me start with some general things. A country can have a huge amount of people, like large population, but country can have a very less of citizens. Because what the difference between population and citizens? Citizen is not just people with passport. Citizens, it's a people with responsibility for everything which is going on in the country and for everything which his or her country is doing on the international arena. And living under repressions and censorship for years and years, they decrease the level of citizens. Because it's something which all authoritarian regimes are doing. They try and ingrain in the mind of people so-called learned helplessness, that you are ordinary. You just to have fulfill someone's orders. It's not for you to decide. You have just to support your government, regardless what your government will be doing. And in living in fear, they push people even voluntarily reject their subjectivity, which means reject their freedom and reject their responsibility. And that's why when you go to see the sociological result of focus groups in Russia, you can hear very neutral and in the same way very cruel rationalizations. They told, if we start the war, we're sure that it was a reason for President Putin to start the war. If we start the war, it will be a huge mistake to lose the war, so we have to win and to achieve all our goals. And so on and so forth. So this is a way of thinking. When people became population, when people reject their responsibility. And that is why it's very, very sad, but it's something which happened already. Majority of Russians supported this war of aggression. Probably they don't be active supporter, but they support everything what their government will propose them to do because they have a very less citizens in the country and a very huge population. And because Putin governed his country not just with repressions and censorship, but with something very important, with social contract, which is based on Russian glory. And the problem is that majority of Russians still see their glory in forcible restoration of Russian Empire. They want to feel themselves great. And they see their greatness only when Russia obtains new territories. And this is another part of problem, this Russian imperialist culture, which is based on total impunity. Because Russian people have never reflected what they did with people in Yakutia, in Chechnya, in Tatarstan, in Ingushetia, what they did previously with people in Ukraine, in Georgia, in Belarus, they have never reflected. When Nazi war criminals were tried, Soviet Gulag was never condemned and punished. So this is a long history of impunity which developed the special sort of thinking of Russian people. So now we speak not about rational arguments, we speak about culture. When majority of Russians, they really think they have a right, a legitimate right to invade another country, to kill people there, to destroy their identity. And what is happening now with this large-scale war? And this is, I will rely on the words of my friends and colleagues, Russian human rights defenders. What they told me. They told that we even can't understand how this large-scale war changed Russian society, even for worse. Because the war became profitable for Russians. Just several examples. Russia pretends to be great, but Russia is very poor. A lot of regions are depressive, people live in horrible poverty. For people from a lot of regions to join the Russian army, it's the only existing social lift. When they joined Russian army, they started to receive money which they can't even dream in this depressive region. Even more, if these people will be killed, in Ukraine, their families will receive money which this concrete person can't earn, even if this concrete person will be working till the end of his life. And my Russian human rights colleagues, they named this type of economy necronomy. They told, you can't understand. It's not just changing economy of the country, it's changing way of thinking, in changing way of perception. The war become profitable. They start to need the war to mobilize people, to centralize Russian regime, and to provide them just some source for living. And I will finish with one important thing, because I speak a lot about Russian people in general. I want to use this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to Russian human rights defenders and those people in Russia who helped us to win this war in different ways. For example, with Russian human rights defenders, we on daily basis working how to help illegally detained civilians and prisoners of the war. I know they are marginals, they are minority. They can't have huge influence to the public opinion because majority of Russians supported this war. They can't have influence to the Russian regime, but they have influence to the concrete lives of people. We have only in our database 4,000 requests for help from relatives whose beloved ones were legally detained. I speak about civilians. And for us, the only way to understand where they are, to send them parcels if it's allowed it, to provide independent lawyers. For sure, they can't change the court verdict, but at least they provide information for families. The only way to do it, it's our brave Russian human rights colleagues who are a tiny minority, but still have a dignity to continue this fight for freedom and for human dignity.
So let's go to your country, Ukraine, then, and comment on the first question that what you think a just peace, and I put the word just peace, would look like to you and to Ukraine, and what does it take from other countries that will support Ukraine in achieving this?
I think it will be a long marathon. I wish I will be mistaken, but for current moment we have no military potential to release people in occupied Crimea or occupied eastern regions or in occupied part of Kherson region or Zaporizhia region. And even if, oops,
that's not a good sound.
Even if miraculously Russia will stop tomorrow, it still put a question, what will be with people in occupied territories? We speak about millions of people who live in gray zone. They have no tools how to defend their rights, their freedom, their property, their lives, their beloved ones. And that is why we can put intermediate goals. And the first goal, I think, for us is to return human dimension into peace negotiation. Because what we see that politicians discussed natural minerals, they discussed Russia's territorial claims, geopolitical interests, even Zelensky's suits, but they don't speak about people. They don't speak what will be with more than 20,000 Ukrainian children who were legally deported to Russia. What will be with thousands and thousands illegally detained civilians subjected to horrible torture and ill treatment daily? What will be with people under occupation? We can't pretend that they are not exist. We can't leave them alone for torture and death. We have no moral rights to do it. So we must return this human dimension, and that's why we start this People First campaign, which our Norwegian human rights colleagues mentioned before. And in order to achieve this intermediate goal, we need your help. And now I will tell 3 concrete things which I think will be helpful from the Norwegian society. First, we know that you supported us a lot. Because when we speak about protracted war, we speak about the mess. Because even to continue to resist and to stop not pushing, stop Russians, not allow them to go further and to attack another country, it's also need resources. And Norway provides us such support, and we are very grateful. We will never forget who was with us with this dramatic time of our history. But we also know that we are fighting not just for ourselves, because Russia is empire. An empire has a center but has no borders. Empire always strives to expand, and you have borders with Russia. So let me quote Putin's words: borders of Russia will never end. So you can also be a potential target. And that's why I encourage you to continue your support. I know that there is a debate in Norway about this, but we are fighting not just for people in Ukraine. We are fighting for the post-World War order, which was created after the Second World War, which means that with our efforts we are preventing the third one. Second, it probably will be more concrete. You have joined to the sanctions against Russia. And this is a way how to decrease the potential of Russian economy to feed this war. Because all these rockets and drones which Russia sent daily to Ukraine, Russia is able to do it because Russia has money. And that's why sanctions, it's a very important tool, but the problem is that Russia finds backdoor how to bypass sanctions. And unfortunately, also with support of Western companies. I mentioned in the beginning this tragedy when mother covered her 4-year-old son with her body just to protect him from Russian drones. When you open these Russian drones or Russian rockets, you will find Western components in it. So Russia still have potential to buy the prohibited technologies for Russia or some other stuff from Switzerland, from United States, from Germany, from different countries who also joined to this sanction list. So what has to be done? On the national level in Norway, I think that oil fund has to create a special sanctions policy which provide the instructions for companies how to do their compliance procedures and checkings to be sure that these goods will not be used to kill Ukrainians. And oil funds have experience to do this because they created such policy for environment, for human rights, for anti-corruption issues. Let's do it for sanctions. It's really very necessity. And last but not the least, because I'm a human rights lawyer and my field of battle is justice, I ask you to be vocal about people affected by this war. Because there is always a temptation to think only about short-term period. Let's frozen everything with the hope that the fire will not start again. But it's not working, unfortunately. If we don't solve the problems, these problems just become more and more harder. And this culture, which is based on impunity, brings wars to Chechnya, to Georgia, to Mali, to Syria, to Ukraine. If we will not demonstrate justice, it's just a matter of time who will be the next target. And we must deconstruct this Russian culture based on impunity to demonstrate decisive legal actions like special tribunal on aggression, using universal jurisdiction in Norway to prosecute people who committed these crimes for their hands, sanctions, and other tools which provide this interforce.
Thank you. I think we have some time now, about 10 minutes, for questions from the audience. So if there's anyone wanting to ask questions, I have a person. There's one person up there, and there's a microphone. Yeah, that's one person there. Yeah.
Dear Oleksandra, it's so great to see you. And my name is Ines Ngajiva. I'm from Norwegian Helsinki Committee, and I would like to first express my respect and admire for what you do and what you you have to keep on. And I have a question about this year will be 50 years since Helsinki Final Act has been signed. And what are your thoughts about this act? Is it by then it was also about peace, it's also about war, and do you think there is a new there should be a new kind of order? You already mentioned that, but in terms of this Helsinki Final Act, and also you also mentioned about your words about Putin and the war. And I remember also Anna Politkovskaya said the same back in 2006 in September, that if you would not stop Putin in Chechnya, he will come to Europe with the war. She never was taken seriously. And I hope really that your words will be now heard. And my question is about, you already mentioned, and thank you so much about your words about human rights defenders in Russia, but how do you see the dialogue with Russian society can happen in terms of, like, if you can say it short? Thank you.
So, well, if there's a place for one more question, so during Oleksandra's answer, you can raise your hand, and I will have one more question. So here you go.
It's very difficult to answer in short to your question, especially during the war, because frankly speaking, we have no idea. Either we're in the end of the war, in the middle of the war, or just in the beginning of the war. But this dialogue in future, they have to start with the truth. And the truth is that Russia violates all international norms and invade independent countries and commit horrible atrocities just to break people's resistance and occupy it. And the problem is that for current moment, we can't even speak about vision of this dialogue, because nobody from Russian side asking for excuse. Sometimes people ask me, will you forgive Russians? But I answer, sorry, but nobody asked for excuse. How you can forgive someone if someone will not even asking for excuse? So it will be a long process, and that's why for us it's so important to save these bridges between Ukrainian and Russian human rights defenders who name the things what they are, who not are doing dialogue, who doing work. And who doing work in circumstances when the law doesn't protect people, their rights, their freedoms, and their human dignity. Returning to your first question, you ask about, I'm sorry, Helsinki Act. Thanks. I think that the existing world order, which is based on UN Charter and international law, created after the Second World War, and the Helsinki process, as well as Council of Europe and all other process, is results of this creation of such an international world order. So this world order, to my opinion, is collapsed. I think it's gone. Our life is short, that probably till the end of my life I will be looking how it's just stalling and reproducing ritualistic movements, but I don't think that we can return to the past, which means that we have to get courage to build a future. A new international order, a new international architecture, a new way how to provide security and human rights guarantees for all people, regardless where they live. And this, for sure, it's not just work of my generations. Unfortunately, it's a very ambitious project. But it has to be done because Russia also working on the same goal. I mentioned a lot about this bombardment, but let's be honest, Russia sent not just Russian rockets, but also Iranian drones and North Korea rockets to Ukraine. So we see how these countries supported each other. They are very different, but they have something in common. They have the same idea what a human being is. They have the same vision how the new world order has to look like. And that's why when Putin came to China to meet Xi Jinping in 2022, just in 3 weeks after they jointly published their statement about new world order, he started large-scale war. So this is civilizational fight. This is not just fight between Russia and Ukraine. This is fight between authoritarianism and democracies for the place of freedom and human dignity in new world order. This is what is going on, and we have to step in this battle, because if we will be just passive, they can succeed. There is no guarantee that new world order will be based on human rights. There is no guarantee that our children will live in free societies. Look, you are a minority. You belong to 20% of people who can vote freely for whom they want to vote. 80% of people in the world live in non-free or partially free societies. Freedom is disappearing as phenomena. And with the new digital instruments, authoritarianism can build powerful concentration camps, not just physically, but digital concentration camps like China did. So I don't know how much time we have, but we have to step into this battle to restore Helsinki process, to reform Council of Europe, to start a battle how the new architecture of UN has to look like, because it's not okay that country which started aggressive war has a veto power in UN. It sounds very abstract, but I'm sorry. It's our duty. It's our responsibility. We have to decide either we population of the country which enjoyed security and human rights for decades, with no guarantee that it will be the same in the future, or with citizens. And we will fight for freedom. We'll fight for democracy. We'll fight for future of our children.
Thank you so much, Oleksandra. Time is coming up for 10 o'clock, and I think those words that you had in the end here really marked what we are all going to do. So I'm very grateful that you came here to Oslo, and thanks so much, and good luck with your work. And thanks also to the Helsinki committee that organized this meeting together with us in Civita. Thank you.
Thank you very much.